So I'm actually at the school right now. No one's in my room though, which is why I'm maskless. But I think a lot of people bring second monitors. You can even get them from Goodwill or from upperclassmen who are selling them. You can buy like huge dry erase boards from like, what is it, Home Depot or Lowe's. Like they'll just cut you a giant sheet. But I think honestly, a lot of people are just taking notes on their laptop anyways. Some people use an iPad to draw. It's definitely not necessary. But the nice thing about the labs that you're going to be assigned to, you're like assigned your own desk at school. So you can really move in. Like a lot of people will bring like, we have mini fridges in these rooms, so you can stock them with your snacks. You can bring your own coffee pot if you need some caffeine. You can bring slippers or blankets if you get cold in this room. So you can really like make school feel very homey. And you don't need a lot of extra tech. Whiteboards can be useful, but I mean, I think a lot of people are totally okay with just their computer.
Okay. So the next question is, what is the balance between direct patient care and shadowing for your clinical experiences?
So clinical experiences in your second year, I think you start ACE, is that correct? So first year? Okay. So you'll have an opportunity to rotate with different doctors for 3 sessions, I think, and then you can have an option to do that again in the second year. There are in that there's maybe a little bit more shadowing, but say let's put you in the MedZoo volunteer role, you would be doing more, one-on-one interactions with patients. So that is a clinical experience. In your M3 year, I can't speak to Columbia as I've been in Springfield, but in Springfield there are no residents outside of family medicine whom you spend 2 weeks with, so you are the intern for the entirety of the experience. So in a medical scenario, I'll go in, interview the patients, do my exam, come out, report, and then the doctor will come in and do the same thing, and then you kind of come up with your assessment plan. On surgery, I was first assist, did some really cool things, opened a few abdomens, that kind of stuff, suture clothes, got to run the Da Vinci robot a couple times, that was a lot of fun. You'll deliver babies, that kind of thing. So it will depend on, where you are, who you're with, but the emphasis, at least in my experience, has been that they want you to interact with patients. They want you to start thinking about what it means to be a physician, and in a clinical or surgical role, how does that look, and what are you going to need in your education to get that. So if you want to do more, you can do more. And if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily want to step up to the plate, some people will let you kind of take a step back. Some people are going to keep you working. So, great experience all around. You learn the ins and outs of hospital medicine and then also outpatient medicine. So there's a lot of experience to be gained. But the emphasis is on real exposure and not just standing in the background.
Okay, thank you. The next question: how do you feel about the class size of 128? Is it too big, or do you feel like PBL makes it feel smaller?
I went to a really small high school. My graduating class was 50, and then at jury and undergrad there were 400 across my class, and there were 1,600 in the school. So coming to Mizzou for me for med school and having a class of 128 hasn't felt terribly small to me. It does feel smaller due to PDL and kind of getting to meet your classmates through different things. I meet a lot of people through Mizzou. So yeah, I would say it's a good mix. It doesn't feel like you're in high school. I know a lot of you probably have high schools that are larger than 128 people in a class, if not all of you. But so it didn't feel like that for me, like it was too small, but it always felt like I could at least recognize people when I see them.
Great. How have you gotten involved in research during your time at Mizzou?
So I can talk about that a little bit. I did a lot in 1 year just because there's so many other things you can get involved with, and you're still trying to kind of figure out med school. But between M1 and M2, the med school offers summer research fellowships, so you can basically reach out to faculty, or there's kind of, I think on RedCap, which is like a data gathering website, there's a list of all sorts of projects you have the opportunity to work on. So I got involved there, and then just kind of reached out to faculty and heard about projects, talked to other students, and got on additional things. My experience is it's been pretty easy to find research. Just reach out to somebody, or if you hear about a project that sounds interesting, just send an email. Most FNAs are pretty receptive to that, so it's been pretty easy, I think.
Yeah. So it's just kind of in the same topic. So this is a question for the F4s. How much research do you all do to feel competitive for MASH?
There's a wide spectrum based on specialty and then even programs within that specialty. So I can learn along the way, very research heavy, neurosurgery, any really competitive ones, neurosurgery, dermatology, ENT, etc. Ophtho is up there, not terrible. I can speak to ophthalmology a bit. I would say, so I know the data some, so I know the average ophthalmology applicant does not have a first author publication, but 45% do. So in just one, and that's kind of a lot of program screening criteria, just to give you a sense if information most people think. Let's see. And then as far as I'll speak to the last question, as far as finding research activities, if you are looking at multiple schools, just look at a couple things. One, how many full-time researchers are maybe in your subspecialty of interest, will be funded positions. You can compare that to departments, and then also look at clinicians, how many publications are they putting out, how often is that happening? It can give you a sense of what opportunities exist in that department. Yeah, if you have any more nuanced stuff, feel free to reach out.
I have sort of a follow-up question for Aaron. So Mizzou is obviously excellent in rural health and family medicine and whatnot. Going into ophthalmology, do you feel that Mizzou had plenty of resources and research to get involved in? And kind of what was that process like for you?
Yeah, so at Mizzou, every department is specialty specific, I would say. We're lucky with a very supportive ophthalmology department and a good track record in terms of where we send people. So people are willing to invite us to younger people to interview at this location. So it's a good situation, but you learn to look at ophthalmology, and I saw your message. It looks like you have some experience in the work to help Missourians, okay, but also the rest of the world for our values. But they certainly don't discriminate against people who are interested in subspecialties in any way.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is, what type of summer programs or fellowships have you all been a part of?
I did the rural fellowship, I guess, between one and 2 year, and that was nice. So I spent 4 weeks in St. Genevieve, Missouri, and I worked with a family doc out there, and then also their hospital at the local community hospital, and also a cardiologist that they were lucky to have living in the area. It was a great experience. Again, that was one where as a first year, just going into my second year, I had the opportunity to spend time working with clinicians and doing a lot of medicine in a community that doesn't have a large healthcare system. So, when you're rounding on your patients, there are, I think, 14 beds in the hospital. So, it's pretty easy to see them all. Clinic, of course, is a little bit more, 9 to 5. So that was just a good experience to see how different areas do healthcare when they don't have kind of the centers like Mizzou or some of the other larger hospitals in the country. So I really enjoyed that experience. I lived with a family for that 4 weeks, so they do provide housing for that. And I know there are a lot of other opportunities, so I'm sure some of our other students may be able to share a little bit more about other programs. But since they're not, we'll jump in and talk a little bit about the research fellowship as well. There's an opportunity to do a research fellowship in summers. Those are funded, and you're able to start a research project work with folks on campus. Some people will apply to programs outside of Mizzou and get in and do that. I know several of my classmates made overtures and were able to do some research over the summer that way. So a lot of people will either decide to do research or to invest their time in a clinical experience over the summer. It's a great time, really, because you do have some time off. And that is a way to kind of make inroads at other institutions that you may be interested in for residency or other training. So a lot of people use that time also to shadow. So some people will do that. It's not necessarily a formal program, but you could use that time and do shadowing as well, or look for other opportunities. I think, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There are fellowships in our pathology. There's a pathology fellowship. A few of our classmates did that. And you're able to spend a year working with pathologists and really work as their intern there. So that's great. So you spend a full year funded doing that. Gives you an opportunity to work with another subset of medicine that you wouldn't maybe otherwise be exposed to day to day. But certainly they're kind of a physician's physician when they're trying to diagnose and look at different things under a microscope, or help us with other clinical questions or surgical questions that may be answered through looking at the actual tissues themselves.
I obviously haven't done mine yet because still in school, but I can talk about what I will be doing this summer. So I will also be doing the rural track program this summer. I'll be in Sikeston, Missouri for 6 weeks, working with their hospital there. They have a private practice and a full hospital, so I'll be working with both. And then for 2 other weeks, I'll be working with the clinical rural immersion program, which is this year in Sedalia, Missouri, where I'll work with teams of nursing students, pharmacy students, very interdisciplinary experience to work with all the teams in the hospital and kind of see what everyone's role is and learn more about that community and how the interdisciplinary role plays a factor in the rural setting.
Great, thank you. I put a link to the summer programs and the options that you have in case you want to check it out. It's in the chat. And so the next question is a Mizzou free clinic open? And if not, will it be open in the fall? So Emily, this might be you.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So there's, I know the video got said that we were fully on telehealth, which we still are. We had some exciting updates with that pretty recently, though. Actually, just yesterday, our proposal was approved. So here in the next couple of weeks after spring break, we will be bringing back our specialty clinics that rotate on Monday evenings on a very limited basis to kind of phase in our return to clinic. And at the end of our 4th block, which ends mid-May, then we plan to open our general clinic, which sees primary care needs, also on a very limited basis, kind of hoping to phase that in over the summer. So hopefully by the time you all get there in the fall, then we can be a little more normally open depending on how things go. And so kind of the process with that for your involvement would be you would start being involved block 2. So hopefully by the time we get to block 2, we're back to where we were before. So yes, we are planning to open soon, but we are also planning to keep telehealth for things such as like medication refills, things that don't necessarily need a physical exam, that the patient may be better served by a telehealth call where they don't have to make the trip to clinic.
Awesome. Okay, so the next question is for the upperclassmen. How useful did you find PBL once you got to your M3 and beyond? And were there any downsides to heavy emphasis in PBL in your opinion?
I can speak to that. I would say, I might be naive, somebody can correct me, but I have not thought of a downside to PBL. The biggest evidence I can give you for its benefit is that consistently when our students go on away rotations, people make note that we are better clinical reasoners and better communicators and better interactors with patients than other students who went through traditional curriculums and spent their time in dungeons not interacting with each other for a couple years. It teaches you how to think clinically from day one. And if you embrace it for those purposes, it's much smoother. It's a much smoother transition to the 3rd year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with Aaron in that regard. And then also just it's funny, you'll find yourself thinking through things like when you don't know the answer to something, or maybe it's a case you've seen, you a little bit more complicated management of something, you'll start thinking through things, and it makes it second nature. It's also introducing you to just the way most, medical records now, the way you're going to read them are going to be very similar. You're going to be familiar with all aspects of that, which is very helpful. You'll kind of know what's important, what's not important. And that's helpful as well. As far as negatives for PBL, it's not a negative. It just depends on how you like to learn. If you're somebody who wants reams of information and you just want to get it from lectures and you just want to read books and you want to be left by yourself every day of the week, PBL is going to require that you work with a team of people and that you're going to have to make decisions and create learning objectives and work for one another that is beneficial to the group. So it's a non-competitive atmosphere in that regard because everybody pulls together or the team falls behind. So that may be jumping ahead to a little bit of questions, but competition is with yourself, not with other people. I would never say that people are stressed out because they're competing against their classmates. In fact, you probably do better because you have your classmates and they have your back. So all of the resources that we use and create actually are generated by our students, and at least those through PBL and objectives and things like that. All that information is shared. Nobody hoards anything. And that's a real great advantage because a lot of people take a much deeper dive than I ever would reading something. So I've gained a lot of clinical knowledge through the expertise and interests of other people in PBL. And that's very helpful in clinic because you can kind of sit there and think about, well, that one time I heard about this interesting story. And so those little experiences with people really can give you some insight that you wouldn't otherwise have. And yeah, we have been caught, I guess, occasionally, it's like, I can see you thinking about this problem in your head. So, people do notice that we are thinking through things before we make a decision.
Awesome. So next is, outside of MedZoo, do you feel like there are other opportunities to get involved in working with marginalized populations around health disparities?
I think that MedZoo actually has like a lot of opportunities besides just going to the clinic. So they might just say like, hey, we're taking a bunch of medical students to this homeless shelter on Thursday. Whoever wants to come. So it's not as much of a commitment. So there are little add-on activities like that through MedZoo. There's also like, we have different interest groups in the medical school, which is basically clubs. And one of them is the domestic violence interest group, and they support a local women's and children's shelter. That's something that a lot of people get involved with. There's also the new MU Med Pride Alliance that deals with health disparities in the LGBTQ community. So there's definitely a lot of different opportunities, and like your level of commitment can vary because our schedule is always different. So you're always able to do the things that you want to do, but you never have to feel like you might not want to sign up for joining an activity because you're afraid that you might not be able to balance it with school. So it's really easy to like make these things work with your schedule and work with different populations. It's also required, I think, as Block 4 IPC to do quality improvement projects that will place you in various like community resources. When I was in Block 4, that was March of 2020, so right when COVID hit. So a lot of things were like via Zoom, but that might be different in a year from now.
Yeah. So going back a little to the competitiveness, there's a question about, do you find that going to Pass-Fail honors and 2 year and then having the other distinctors in 3 and 4 years after just having Pass-Fail your first year make things competitive or more stressful?
Sorry to preempt you, Aaron, but again, a lot of it is, what your interaction and your experiences are with the person that you're working with and the people that you work with in your clinical experiences, right? Because they're going to be the people who grade you, evaluate you. The other half of that component is the shelf exams themselves. Those are going to determine a lot of whether or not you qualify for those higher levels of honors. And that's against a national audience, right? So you're competing against all other med students who take it during that block. Same thing like your board exams. So in that regard, the competition comes down to how much effort, work, interest do you want to show within a particular field? And then also, just kind of how you gear yourself up to that. I would never say that my colleagues made it any more competitive. I might try to work harder because my group of friends or the study group I'm with is working really hard to do certain things, so they can move you ahead. I've never had folks really hold me back or pull me back. Aaron, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you are seriously right on. I worked with some like awesome people and I worried early on that maybe, oh, this is going to be like, well, they look great, then even if I am great, I'll look lesser than. But it really pushed me to be better, and I was different from those folks, but we all ultimately succeeded, from what I understand. I never felt that I was being held back by another student. Really, everyone is kind of working as hard as they can, especially in the clinical years. If you aren't interested in a field, then that's sort of different. You're working as hard as you can, and we'll sort itself out, like how the test goes, how life is treating you, and just like your work capacity, honestly.
And just to add on to like the honors designation, like moving from M1 to M2, that information is not like public. There's no like list of people that get honors is posted. So as far as my class goes, like I have no idea who has gotten honors, because that's just something that people would keep to themselves. I think we're like past the age where everyone's like, I got a 96 in the group me. No one's doing that. So I don't think it makes the environment competitive. I honestly think it might be easiest to feel competitive in the beginning of medical school, because I think pre-medical education can be really competitive and everyone's really used to having to feel like they're on top of their A game. But you're just starting medical school and you have a ton of information that you have never seen before. So it's really easy to feel like I have no idea what's going on. And then you have to like, oh, maybe I should study 8 more hours so I can catch up, because I don't want to be the one that doesn't know. But really, you just have to get used to the feeling that you're not going to know everything. You're going to feel like there's so much out there that you don't know. And that's just true, and that's okay. And I think as long as you like accept the fact that you don't know what's going on, that really reduces the competition instead of feeling like you need to catch up, because I think that will contribute to feeling competitive. But once you get to know everyone, it evens out and you feel better and less competitive.
So the next question is, did any of you do away rotations, and can you talk a bit about those? No?
So the current M4s are away rotations would have been at the beginning of COVID. I was set up to do one, but nationally, the AAMC said no away rotations. So, sorry, guys.
Yeah. So this year we get one. So they revised their recommendations. We get one away rotation. So I'm in the middle of kind of looking at where I potentially want to go and trying to get all of that sorted out. But it's a lot different this year because it's up to the program as to whether or not they allow students to rotate there. Some programs are only saying unless you cannot rotate in your chosen specialty at your institution, then you can do an away. But yeah, so it's a lot different this year. We can't do them before August 2nd. So all of that's kind of been thrown off a lot by COVID.
So this might be the last question because we have 2 minutes, but is anyone able to speak much to the PM&R department?
I can answer that real quickly. Dr. Warsowitz, who is now leaving, was one of the folks who was very involved there. He was one of my mentors at one point or another, and I think it's an excellent department. They do a lot of great work there. So unfortunately, I can't speak to it directly, but I know the people who are very interested in it are able to find opportunities and work with them very successfully.
And in your ACE experience, you might be able to go to the PM&R. That was my first ACE experience, so I know it's great. But thank you everyone for being here. I think that's going to be the last question.